Good evening. For 200 years, this nation has given every new president its hand and its help and a chance to lead. Senator Lloyd Bentsen and I are here tonight to tell you that the Democratic Congress wants to work with this president in every way that we can. We'll give him our sincere cooperation. That doesn't mean obedience. It does mean our honest help and our very best advice. In world affairs, Democrats in Congress are committed to seeking true bipartisanship in all areas of America's foreign policy. As we deal with other nations of the world, friends or foes, Americans ought to stand together. America struggles today to overcome three enormous deficits: the budget deficit, the trade deficit, and the social deficit, which results from our prolonged underinvestment in such things as public education and industrial modernization. These deficits have been feeding on one another in a vicious way. In just the short time it took us to hear Mr. Bush make his speech tonight, the public debt was increasing by about $15 million. Well, that much is added to our children's bill every 50 minutes. As the debt skyrocketed during the past decade, trade deficit grew, and our standard of living began to fall for the first time in modern recollection. Instead of employing Americans making goods to sell abroad and lending money to those who buy our goods, well, we've been buying things that others make and borrowing from them to pay for it. And to pay back our borrowings, we've been selling off little pieces of America. Foreign interests now own a bigger and bigger slice of this country. And that's just not good enough. We have seen the gap grow wider between the rich and poor in our own country. And the average American families today are finding it harder, not easier, to pay for such necessary things as housing, health care, higher education for our children. As we sit in our warm homes right now, gazing at our television sets, some things are easy to forget. I ask you to remember when you go to bed this evening that 3 million of our fellow countrymen are homeless. They have no place of their own to eat or sleep, take a bath, wash their clothes. Their children have no place to study or play. No, these are not just derelicts or ne'er-do-wells or social misfits. They represent many families of the working poor who have low-paying jobs and work every day. They just can't find a way to pay for the inflated price of counseling. America can do better. We must do better. Now, of course, we can't expect to vanquish all these evils immediately, but if we have the will, we can make significant progress against all three deficits this year. We in the Congress, and surely all Americans everywhere, are anxious to help our president fulfill his promise of a kinder, gentler America. I want very much to help George Bush qualify to be known as the education president. We in Congress are eager to help him attain the goals he has expressed: wider access for all Americans, Head Start services, safe and wholesome daycare facilities in an age when both parents have to work, affordable housing and a cleaner environment. By working hard together, we must drive the scourge of drugs from our streets and our schools, as Mr. Bush pledged in his inaugural speech and in his speech tonight. Congress made significant progress last year on this truly bipartisan goal. We developed a good battle plan for the war against drugs, but when it came to paying for the war, the government ran out of money. Right now, we're not financing a war, but a skirmish. And that's not good enough. Our society can't afford to pay for a vigorous anti-drug effort. The truth is, we can't afford not to. That's our first line of defense. That and the education of our children more vital to our national security than Star Wars. But since 1980, the federal investment in education has actually declined by 12%. Is it any wonder that American students, better fed and surely just as smart, do worse in mathematics, languages, geography, science than students do in almost any other industrial nation? That's not good enough. We can do better than that, and we will. Working together, Congress will pass a clean air bill this year to protect that precious commodity on which all human life depends. A kinder, gentler America, that's old-time democratic religion. We embrace it enthusiastically. Now we know, and you know, that these goals cannot be achieved by words alone or by symbolic gestures. They require money, the commitment of resources sufficient to win the battle against these common enemies. On the question of how these vital initiatives will be paid for, the Democrats in Congress will insist on fairness. We'd have to reject any kind of a flexible freeze that would bend with flexibility for the rich and powerful, freeze out the middle-income families of America. We will oppose attempts to cut Medicare. We are ready to meet with President Bush anytime he wishes and seek common solutions. Our House Budget Committee will begin its formal hearings in just a few days. The President's representatives are invited. We're determined to complete our work on time, pass our appropriations bills on time, again this year, as we did last year. We do have limited resources and urgent challenges. But, there are some things we can do without spending public money. We must raise the minimum wage, held down for 8 long years, because those who work honestly for wages in America must never receive less than they would on welfare. We can ask that polluters pay more of the cost of cleaning up the poisons which they create and from which they profit. We must encourage American corporations to reinvest in America, plants, factories, jobs, strength, not in leveraged buyouts, paper companies. We should require that corporations ensure the health of their employees, so that the hard-earned family savings of a decade or more cannot be just wiped out by a single illness of a child. When it comes to shaping a kinder, gentler, and fairer nation, the real test is not whether we have the words, but whether we have the will. For ultimately, we will be judged by what we've done. In the years ahead, long after this night's forgotten and praises have faded and our page of history has turned, let it be said of us that we have refreshed America's sense of common concern, that we renewed America's basic strength, and that together we reached out for America's future and put our faith and our investment in the American people. In our earnest efforts to help the new president build this future, the House and Senate will work together. The Senate Democratic majority is represented tonight by the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, our recent nominee for Vice President of the United States, Senator Lloyd Bentsen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My friends, George Bush and I have had our battles, but we've been on the same side too. As far back as 45 years ago, we were both young men, bomber pilots, defending the cause of freedom. There's nothing like the first puffs of anti-aircraft fire to teach a flight crew about the need to work together. Tonight, we're together again. Democrats and Republicans may disagree on tactics, but we have the same destination in mind: a strong, free, prosperous America. There's a lot we can do together. Because we have worked as a team, America is stronger militarily. President Reagan achieved a major nuclear arms reduction treaty. That's good. My old colleague, the late Scoop Jackson, once said that in foreign policy, the best politics is no politics. I agree. Democrats won't play politics with matters of war and peace. Remember, that military buildup was enacted with lots of Democratic votes. Democrats know how to work as a team. We've done it. That doesn't mean we won't disagree. There'll be sharp, principled disagreements among Democrats and Republicans over one of the greatest challenges America has ever faced. Because today, our great industrial heartland is under attack, not from foreign military forces, from new technology, from foreign competition, often from our allies. You see the evidence everywhere. You see it in ships pulling up to American docks loaded not with immigrants, but with Volkswagens. You see it in the living rooms of America, in those VCRs so many of you tonight have sitting beside the TV set. None of those VCRs are made in America, not one. It's all very well to say, read my lips. Japanese computer companies tell customers, read my chips. It's effective. Even the Pentagon buys Japanese microchips. The result? We're losing good jobs. And that hurts the very fabric of America. A few months ago in Dawson, Georgia, after 2 plants closed, wiping out 2,000 jobs, a high school class was asked where they would settle after graduation. Only 2 out of 20 wanted to stay in Dawson. At the beginning of this decade, our workers had the highest average income in the world. Today, that distinction belongs to the West Germans and the Japanese. Is it inevitable that we lose to Japan or the other Pacific Rim countries or Europe united by 1992? Should kids growing up in Dawson, Georgia, settle for a second-class economy dependent on the goods of others? I don't buy that. America is a country of great strength. We can take charge of our economic future. But to do that, we're going to have to be more productive. You can't have a vacuum tube outlet for the age of microchips. We'll have to get tough with those countries whose trade practices are unfair. We deserve a level playing field, and we'll have to face some hard facts. Example. Under the last administration, we became the largest debtor nation in history. Last year, our trade deficit was $150 billion. That's cost us 500,000 manufacturing jobs. Example, the last administration rolled up more debt than every administration from George Washington to Jimmy Carter combined. This year, 1 out of every 7 federal dollars, another $150 billion, will go just to pay interest on that debt. We don't oppose foreign investment, but why should the money from average taxpayers go to pay off bonds owned by rich bondholders, whether from Tokyo or Palm Beach? How can we stay competitive? How can we even preserve Social Security when we saddle ourselves and our children with such a debt? It's like putting lead weights on Michael Jordan's legs and asking him to slam dunk anyway. Frankly, I don't think Republicans have faced up to these twin towers of debt or some other problem. Education. Right now, 25% of our youngsters won't finish high school. 25 million Americans can't read the warning label on a bottle of poison. The Army uses comic books for instruction manuals. There's a 5-page comic to explain how to release the hood of a Jeep. How are we going to stay competitive that way? We have to cure adult illiteracy. We must train Americans for the sophisticated jobs of the 1990s. The environment. We have to send a message to polluters, whether they dump PCBs into our riverbeds or fluorocarbons into the atmosphere. We have to tell them the free ride is over, that we want air we can breathe and water safe to drink. And let's send a message to those who think they can fly light planes loaded with cocaine across our southern borders, or sell crack in the schoolyards of New York and Chicago. The message to drug dealers and criminals is this: you can't hide behind smart lawyers. We won't plea bargain away our rights. We'll find you, we'll catch you, and we'll put you away. A few years ago, Yelena Bonner, the Soviet dissident, visited America. Americans don't want war, she wrote. They want a house. She's right. But it's becoming harder and harder to find housing, not just for the homeless, but for those who grew up in homes and want to buy one for their family. For the first time in 4 decades, the home ownership rate is declining in America. I meet lots of young couples who simply had to move in with mom and dad. They'd like to be on their own, and mom and dad think that's a good idea too. Finally, ethics. Do we really want Korean companies getting favors from influence peddling ex-administration officials? Or racketeers in New York getting contracts from cronies of an attorney general? It's one thing to have a government that's a friend to business. It's quite another to have one that just wants business for its friends. George Bush is right. There is a new breeze blowing through Washington. But don't expect us to stand with our fingers in the air to see which way that breeze is blowing. We Democrats will work with President Bush, but we will be guided by a set of enduring values. At the top of that list is good jobs at good pay. We want American workers to be the best paid in the world, just as they were 8 years ago. You know, I've been around a long time. But in the last few weeks, my thoughts have often turned to a man who was around even longer. In fact, for almost half the history of our country. He was born dirt poor. His parents were homesteaders on the plains of South Dakota in a sod house. When that first blizzard blew in, the family took turns staying awake during one 36-hour stretch, burning bundles of straw so they wouldn't freeze to death. They made it through the storm. They lived. My father worked hard. We prospered. And last fall, shortly before his death, he had the privilege of seeing his son campaign for Vice President of the United States. I wish we'd done a little better for him. Still, my friends, in the story of Lloyd Benson Sr. lies the promise of America. It's a reminder that this country allows those who believe in hard work and teamwork to succeed, whether sod busting during a South Dakota winter or as president. At this moment, when President Bush has announced his flight plan for the years ahead, we Democrats in the co-pilot seat say, let's work hard, together, to keep America strong, not just in planes and tanks, but in the factory, in the farmhouse, and in the schoolhouse. We'll make sure that when our children look back on the last years of the 20th century, they'll say we did the job. We kept the American dream alive. Thank you, and God bless you.